Day, which means picks against the spread involving AP top 25 teams. I'm Tommy Tran, joined by one half of the Cover podcast, Chip Patterson and Danny Kanell. 4 weeks now, and you get a good sample size if you guys had 2 bad weeks and 2 good weeks. Chip, 12-3 now to get over 500. Danny, you're getting close, 1 game under 500. Chip, you're starting to get a feel of like the teams, and we're not having as many FCS games and things like that, so it's starting to be a little bit better of a handicap situation, is it not?
Yeah, the idea of you spend so many months, literal months on our part, diving into this and formulating opinions. And so the most important thing that we can do is to be able to be willing to let go and be able to totally change our reading and our ranking and our rating on these teams. And I think that's something I've learned, is that there's a great opportunity that when you see those preseason priors are wrong, sometimes, Tommy, it is a more profitable enterprise in the middle of the season because you can get ahead of the adjustments as the models maybe hang on a little bit longer than the Chipalytics do.
We've got 4 ranked, unranked matchups this week, but again, we go in chronological order, and if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to find your game and skip right to it. But we do have a couple Friday night games involving Florida State on the road, nearly a touchdown favorite against Virginia. Danny, the conversation with Tommy Castellanos, that ankle, he says he's 100%. Mike Norvell, not surprisingly, non-committal earlier in the week. I don't think we're going to get an official word until game time, but do you assume that Castellanos will play in this game?
Are you on TikTok?
No.
You're not? No. Well, see, then you don't know what I know, and I'm sure Chip does, because Chip's big on TikTok. I saw Tommy Castellanos in the locker room dancing around after their game against Kent State. So and he said, I'm all good. Like he said, don't worry about it, no fam. I'm ready to go. So I'm going to take him at his word. Now, is he 100%? Is he the same weapon that he's been in the run game? We shall see. But there is no doubt in my mind that he will be under center. And I think that's the most important thing. This game terrifies me. It really does. I almost feel like if you were going to take a side and you wanted to back Virginia, just take the money line. And if you're going to take Florida State, take an alt line, because this, I don't know if there's one in the middle. I'm going to lean towards Florida State and an alt line if you're so inclined. I'll go ahead and lay the 6.5. I do think this team realizes there's something special. The taste of last year is still in their mouth, and if they're any sort of some temptation to overlook this opponent, all Mike Norvell has to do is remind these players what happened last year when they weren't dialed in, or where they didn't give their best effort. And while that Miami game looms just a week away, I think he'll be telling them, hey, we have to take care of business first. I think Florida State comes out early. I think they set the tone early. But Chandler Morris is more than capable of putting up some numbers on this Florida State defense if they don't come out. But I think they'll be getting after him all night. I think Florida State does have their way. So I'll lay the 6.5.
Chip?
Yeah, I'm going to be going with just that Florida State offense against this Virginia defense, because I do think that Chandler Morris is a very dangerous threat, but he's also a dangerous threat to himself and to Virginia's chances of winning, because he does have a couple of turnovers that might be creeping below the surface. And when you've got a long sample size, quite like Chandler Morris does through his college career, that there's going to be some ghosts there. So my best bet here is just to target the Florida State team total. Got it over 33.5. And my thought was, going back and looking at Virginia's defense, the overall statistical profile includes a couple good games and a couple of neutral or negative games. The good games, they were against, William and Mary in Coastal Carolina. And your bad games were against Stanford and NC State. I just think this is a step up in competition that the Virginia defense has not had to face at all. Meanwhile, Florida State, through a lot of these games that we're going to see, including, that look-ahead game that Danny mentioned against Miami, they got battle-tested in week 1. They learned so much about themselves, even in victory. So I am expecting Tommy Castellanos to play, but I'm expecting Gus Malzahn to be back in his bag and Florida State to be able to get well into the 30s.
A win can already double the win total from a season ago, so it's already been an impressive start for Mike Norvell. You guys mentioned Gus Malzahn. UVA will be throwing back throwback uniforms this Friday. And Danny, this was 1995. Our producer, by the way.
Come on. He's in. Watch, he's in. That's a touchdown. His whole body, his whole torso is across the goal line. The ball crossed the line. Anytime I see Tiki or Rondé Barber, I tell them he was in. Oh, my goodness. That was a touchdown. And then we got the field rushed against us. We threw it 67 times in that game, which I would suggest running Warwick Dunn just a little bit more. I did have 3 interceptions. This game cost me a Heisman Trophy, so thank you for bringing up that great memory.
Thank you, producer Jane. Yeah, 32 of 67. You did have 3 touchdowns, and then Tiki Barber, 193 on the ground.
What did you say how many? I think I was 52 of 67, wasn't I?
Oh,
42? 42 of 67.
Okay, 42 of 67.
Yeah, don't
the fact that you threw it 67 times
yes,
was pretty
nuts.
crazy. You guys are, again, this week and this year back in the Knolls. Let's get to another Friday night game. I still call it Sun Devil Stadium. It's Mountain America Stadium out in Tempe, and it's going to be TCU, ranked number 24 in the country, catching points. Short number against Arizona State. Chip, take me through the handicap because you like the hometown team.
Yeah, I do. I like them at this short number. And this is another theme kind of similar that you heard from the Florida State side. I want to know that you've had to bleed a little. I want to know that you've had to sweat a little. And this Arizona State team has had to go to Mississippi State. This Arizona State team has had to go on the road to Baylor. Obviously, they went 1-1 in those 2 road trips. But I don't know how much TCU has learned about itself other than Josh Hoover's really good and Eric McAllister might be unguardable against lesser competition. This is a TCU team that feels very, very good about itself, but I'm not taking much away from an FCS win and wins against SMU and North Carolina. I just like that Arizona State has had to play poorly and pay for it, but also played poorly and find ways to win. Playing at home, I just think their defense is going to be ready for their challenge, their pass defense in general, and I don't think TCU's defense has really had to face anything close to what Jordan Tyson is going to present as a pass-catching option. So I'm going to take Arizona State and lay the short number.
I mean, if we're walking down memory lane, you could have pulled up my first NFL start at Tempe Stadium where I threw a pick 6 on the first third down to Hall of Famer Aeneas Williams. But we did win the game. And you know what I remember about that stadium? It's a fast track, great atmosphere, great weather. It's always going to be pristine. And you know what that means? There are going to be points, points, points. I thought about backing TCU as the road team here, but Chip's been on fire. I don't want to get in front of that freight train. So I'll just tackle the total because you heard what Chip mentioned there about TCU's defense has not faced a challenge like this. Sam Leavitt, Jordan Tyson, one of the best offensive weapons in the country, and they come with Josh Hoover, who's probably one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So I did back taking over last week in the Iron Skillet, came up just short. This one I think lives up to the billing. I'll go over that 55.5. I think this one's a little more of a shootout.
Friday, 9 Eastern. Those are the 2 Friday night games. Now we get into the Saturday slate. Again, we're going to start chronologically and go with the noon game. Number 16, Georgia Tech, nearly 2 touchdown favorites here against Wake Forest with a total at 52.5. Now, you guys have both actually targeted the total here, and it's interesting because we obviously know Georgia Tech with their victory over Clemson, but now a couple weeks removed Clemson, it doesn't look like it's as good of a win, which will also kind of tie into LSU. But take me through the total because you went first half and Chip went full game.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit safer. Like I had taken the whole game under like Chip did, and then I wanted to be a little bit different than him. Have you ever been to Winston-Salem?
Mm-mm.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, it's not exactly the most electric environment, we'll just say that. I think this will be a challenge for Georgia Tech sort of to get up offensively, get going after they saw that incredible win just a couple weeks ago against Clemson. So I think this is a slower starting game. It's a little bit of a tricky number. I considered also Georgia Tech just laying the points because I do think this team, Brent Key always has this team ready to go, ready to run through a wall for him. But it's sort of a tricky spot. Noon kick, early slate, think slower starting game. I think their defense will be able to slow down Wake Forest's offense. They haven't been able to do very much all year. So I like the over in the game too, but I thought the safer play was the first half under.
Yeah. You say you like the under in the full game too,
yeah.
Right? Okay, yeah, all right. Without a doubt. I mean, Wake Forest is a dead under team right now. So right now, there are 43 points per game being scored in Wake Forest football games in 2025. That's not 43 points by Wake Forest. That is 43 points total in Wake Forest football games. Their under margin, as in the amount that they are going under per game, ranks 133rd in the entire country. Because Wake Forest, under Jake Dickert, who has a defensive background, really commits to stopping the run. But the offense cannot do anything. They are going up against a Georgia Tech team that wants to run the football, run the ball, and take their sweet time. Slow tempo, limit the exposures and the hits to Haynes King. And so I do think that being able to get the under here is going to be profitable with what Georgia Tech wants to do with tempo and the way that Wake Forest has been trending under a new head coach. I will admit Georgia Tech Temple did get all the way up into the 60s last week, but I would argue as a pushback that Temple has experienced more offensive success this season than Wake Forest has and is maybe a more dangerous offensive foe, so I like going under the total here in Georgia Tech Wake Forest.
Moving on to Champaign, Illinois, you've got USC and Illinois, which stayed in the top 25 after their loss to Indiana. Before we get into the handicap, Danny, you were on Illinois. Your pregame show, bussing with the boys, Josh Pate, Brian McFadden, not only catching the points, they were like saying money line. How disappointing, though, was maybe not the loss, but the way in which they lost to Indiana?
It was embarrassing. It's one of those ones that has a lot of people looking at Illinois wondering if this was a team that was anywhere that we close to what we thought they were. Now, as our buddy Tom Fornelli did point out, even during the game, they were already down a couple secondary guys, lose a guy to an ejection early in that game. But that, to me, was more about Indiana's coming out party saying, we are exactly the team that we were last year, which is focused, which is playing with a chip on their shoulder, and, by the way, a really good football team, which has upgraded at quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. But Illinois was a little bit disappointed. The defense obviously gave up so many points, and then probably most disappointed they weren't even able to come close to scoring many points. Luke Altmaier struggled. They didn't get the run game going, and then that one just got sideways. So definitely disappointing for Illinois.
And, Chip, quick thought on the Fighting Illini, because, again, top 10, but as you and I know, there were some gambling smart guys and gals out there that really didn't even have Illinois power rated in their top 25, and it kind of finally came to fruition last week.
Yeah, I mean, including Tom Fornelli, who said on the Cover 3 podcast, they're up in the top 10, but that's not where I have them power rated in his own set of power ratings. I think that for Illinois, this is a tremendous test in terms of their overall resolve, their program leadership, because there are a lot of trends that, we're about to get into that also don't work out very well for USC. So being able to respond in what's going to be a very big stage and an early start for these Trojans, win or loss, you just want to see them be able to come back with a roar, come back with some fight, because to let that one loss become two would not be surprising if it's a nameless, faceless football team. That kind of result with that kind of stage can often bleed over into the next week. So this is a lot on Brett Bielema. This is a lot on Luke Altmaier. This is a lot on the Illinois football leadership to try and make sure that they can flush it and look ahead to USC.
11 a.m. local kick, as Chip mentioned. USC played late Saturday night. Got to go to Champaign. Danny, you're going to lay the 6.5 with the Trojans in this game.
Wait, I mentioned earlier the old body clock conversation, 9 a.m. local for USC players having to get up that early. Could be a little bit of a sluggish start. I think this is a great litmus test for USC. We just saw Indiana, who we all consider now all of a sudden a playoff contender with that performance. I think USC is a playoff contender. Now you get to go, and I know it's on the road, whereas Indiana was at home, but I still think this is a great opportunity for me, for Jaden Maeva, the quarterback at USC, where you just saw Fernando Mendoza completely torch that secondary, which is still pretty dinged up, with Mekhi Lemon, one of the better receivers in the country, with Maymon Jordan running the football, and a defense which still leads the country in sacks with 16. So we saw Luke Altmaier struggle some last week with protection. I think USC's defense plays a big part in this game too. So I'll go ahead and lay the 6.5.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the first half under in this game. I think that when you look at the advantages that USC is going to have with the pass catchers against Illinois' banged up secondary, you just want to limit the number of possessions in this game. You want to try and establish the run. As Danny mentioned earlier, the game gets sideways, and now all of a sudden Illinois' offense has lost all balance, and the Indiana defense can absolutely tee off on Luke Altmaier. Things get a little bit sideways. I could see that Illinois wanting to start by running the football and maybe break out a little bit of a old school Wisconsin Brett Bielema type approach, and that would lead to a slower start. Over the course of 4 quarters, I do think USC is going to be able to win, but if the Trojans are a little bit slow to get going and Illinois is contributing, I think that's a lower scoring first half. I mean, 30.5 is a big number for a first half total, so I definitely like going under there.
Another noon game in Fayetteville. You got number 22 Notre Dame coming into town. This game opened 5.5, now down to 4.5, and I know the Fighting Irish with the rest of the schedule probably would have liked to have Arkansas beat Memphis. That game was certainly wild in terms of how that ended. But Danny, take me through taking the home dog at 4.5 here.
I think this is a really dangerous spot for Notre Dame. One of our biggest bosses is here today at the office at CBS Sports HQ, and he said, what do you think about Notre Dame? Are 10-2? Are they in the playoff? And I said, you better make sure you take care of business now. And that has been a big point of conversation. They did it last year, right? They lost to Northern Illinois, ran the table, and they were in. I think this is a huge test for them. The defense we've already seen struggle. It's probably the biggest surprise of the season for Notre Dame. Now they have to go against Taylor Green and Bobby Petrino, who's one of the better offensive minds, with a team that's backs against the wall at Arkansas. I think they're able to put up points. I thought about the over. It's pretty big number at 64.5. Scared it off me a little bit. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take Arkansas. It's a tough place to play, Fayetteville. I know it's hunting season. Chip can give you the details on that, how it could impact the crowd. But ultimately, I think Arkansas is a tight game in this one, and I would not be shocked if they pull off the upset.
Yeah, the operative item on the Arkansas hunting calendar is that bow season opens up. And I know that we've got a lot of bow hunters out there around the Ozarks that do like to take advantage. That could be a little bit problematic. But no, but this actually gives us an opportunity to dive into something that it really is one of my foundation bedrocks, because you've all heard about CLV, closing line value. But let me tell you about chip line value, the real CLV. That's when you don't get scared off by line movement. Because when USC was still scoring touchdowns against Michigan State late Saturday night, this game opened up with a total of 59.5. By church on Sunday, it had jumped up to 62.5. Then, all of a sudden, by brunch, you're across 63.5, and now it's 64.5. And you're going to say, whoa, that's too much line movement. No, that's too much. You can't jump in now. Well, dadgummit. If you really think that Arkansas can't stop a nosebleed, which I do think, and that Notre Dame's defense has a ton of issues as well, just giving up 40 points to Texas A&M in a loss, then yes, 65, 66, 67. This game's going to get up into the low 70s. We haven't moved it enough. Give me the chip line value. Give me the number after the movement. I'm going to go over 64.5.
I just thought all those parishioners in church just driving up the line while they're sitting there listening to a sermon.
Just seeing it keep going up. Both teams average 40 points per game. So just to add to what we're talking about with that total there. Let's get to some streaks here in terms of longest active streaks in FBS, and it's a game that actually features both teams, Utah State and Vanderbilt, on this list. 7 for the Aggies, 5 for the Commodores, and Mississippi State, another team that we'll talk about. But 12:45 out in Nashville, Utah State catching north of 3 touchdowns and a total on nearly 60 again at 59 and a hook. Chip, take me through your first half spread play.
Yeah, I mean, bigger fish to fry Saturday. They're going to be going to Tuscaloosa to play Alabama on October 4th. We know that Broncos' big beefy boys will kick in a back door, as Utah State did against Texas A&M. And Utah State, as you can tell by that cover streak, has been able to take care of business ever since Bronco Mendenhall took over. Vanderbilt started showing a little bit of tempo in the game against Georgia State to get out to that early lead and be able to just sort of, keep the Panthers at an arm's distance, make sure there was going to be no upset like there was a year before. I think they've got a few more wrinkles too, stuff that they would like to put on tape, but what they want to put is a T-shirt and no pads on Diego Pavia by the time we get to the third and fourth quarter. So I'm going to go Vanderbilt minus 12.5 in the first half. They jump out to a lead and then start getting ready for Tuscaloosa.
I like the way you're thinking, and I like some of the things you brought up there. You know what I like about Vanderbilt? They are a historically great team by Vanderbilt standards. 70 points last week was the first time in over 100 years. For the first time in 100 years, they've scored 30-plus or more points in each of their first 4 games. I think that streak continues. This offense is legit. And I also think Utah State, we mentioned those backdoor covers, late in games, they've been scoring some points. So I'll just tackle the over. I think Vanderbilt could by themselves come close to this. I'll count Utah State good for 14 points in this game. Okay. Easily sends it over.
Yeah, you talk about the standard that they could potentially here. A win at 5-0 would be the first time. They've been 5-0 since 2008, so it's been a long time for Vandy to be one of the best teams in the country, which they are right now. Let's get to a 3:30 start. Big Ten on CBS from the Pacific Northwest. Number 1 Ohio State, Washington from Husky Stadium. Whew. Let's break this down, spend a few minutes on this. Chip, before we get to picks against the spread, just from a storyline perspective, number 1 team in the country coming off a little bit of extra rest, going into a tough environment to play. What's some of the things that you're looking out for in this game?
I'll lay off a little bit on the Julian Sayin first road start, because it's also a first road start against a defense that, in my opinion, is better built on the back end than it is up front. I mean, they've got some real players at the cornerback position that I do think will be playing on Sundays. And so when you're thinking about trying to hold down Jeremiah Smith, when you're thinking about trying to keep Kanell Tate from being that secondary option that burns you, I just think that there's an opportunity for Washington to really create some problems for Ohio State. The problem for Washington in that sense is that when Texas did a good job of containing the Ohio State passing attack, well, Ohio State was just more than happy to lean on its offensive line, its defensive line, running the football, playing field position, and a defense that continues the trend from last season. Because while that Ohio State offense was very good last season, it was that elite defense that I think really kept them in position to always be in the national championship picture all the way through the college football playoff. Then Jeremiah takes over, and you really see the explosion in the CFP run to the title. So for me, it's Julian Sayin going up against a Washington defense that really could present some problems for the run game, but does that mean we get to see the real superpower of Ohio State's offense, which might be its offensive line?
I do think it's a big game for Julian Sayin. He's been good. He hasn't been great yet. He might have to be great in this game. Against Texas, they were able to limit his exposure, didn't ask him to do too much. Is coming off a performance that he had 2 interceptions. This is the type of game where that margin is going to be that much tighter. You don't have the luxury of being able to just rely on your defense to get a complete shutdown. This game, according to the odds makers, should be very tight in the fourth quarter. I think that too. So I think this is a lot of pressure on Julian Sayin going on the road. It's one of the tougher environments to play. I know locally it's just a 12:30 kickoff, but they will be coming straight from the boats in there to make a lot of noise, and it is one of those stadiums that contains the noise, one of the louder environments. As Chip mentioned, their defense is pretty nasty.
Could see an opportunity for Julian Sayin to go Super Saiyan in this game, and we saw a graphic of Damon Williams in this Huskies offense here, Danny. How much of that goes into your handicap because you like the home dog catching the points?
I do. I love this Washington team right now. Matt Patricia has been great. They have not missed Jim Knowles at all. And remember the Texas game, we were talking about all the disguising and the unique looks that they threw at Arch Manning in that Texas game. You can throw all those looks and you could confuse Damon Williams, but guess what he can do? If he doesn't like what he sees, he can absolutely hurt you with his legs. And when there is a talent gap, and I do think there's a talent gap, that is not insulting to Washington. Ohio State has one of the best rosters out there. It can be very frustrating. You think you get a sack, he escapes. You think you have the right coverage, he escapes. As long as he stays as good with the football as he's been through this season and the end of last year, which has been perfect, I very much think Washington has a chance to keep this in the fourth quarter. I'm not willing to go out there and say it's an outright upset. I think it's a win that Ohio State gets that you'll walk away from and, all right, we feel pretty good about Ohio State, but that was a really tough Washington team. He mentioned the secondary. They have 2 corners that are 6'4". Those guys are built to cover Jeremiah Smith, who's one of the bigger wide receivers out there, and it does help them with Kanell Tate as well. So I think it's a closer game.
Yeah, limit mistakes. Just get in, take care of business, lean on your talent advantage, lean on some of your size advantage. Let Matt Patricia go and win this thing. I might find myself looking at Ohio State unders as a starting point principal play once we really get into the thick of the Big Ten Conference schedule. No, TBD on that, but I think that Ohio State's toys that they have on offense might not always be putting up the video game numbers that you would expect given their talent, and this is a good test case for it and a great test case if you're trying to limit the mistakes of a quarterback who is in a really, really hostile territory for the first time in his career as a starter. So I'm going to be going under the 52.5.
I know people have said that Washington hasn't played anybody yet, and that's true, but they did get up for an Apple Cup game, so at least they have that going for them, momentum, getting ready for the #1 team in the country. As Danny mentioned, a fantastic venue that we'll see on CBS. Let's get to Indiana now, 7.5 against Iowa at Kinnick. We'll see if the hook matters here, but before that, Danny, you talked about Mr. Mendoza here, betting favorite to win the Heisman. I know the John Mateer news certainly impacts that a little bit, but do you think it's justified as of right now at plus 850 over other guys like Dante Moore and Jeremiah Smith.
There's definitely some recency bias in this. I mean, Carson Beck struggled in their game, even though they won. So you had some other, Mateer got hurt. So you saw some other guys who had opportunities that didn't shine. And then on the biggest stage of the weekend in prime time, he goes out there and throws 5 touchdown passes. And everybody's like, who's this Fernando Mendoza? Then you go look and see that his 15 touchdown passes leads the nation. We know very much oftentimes it becomes a very statistical award. And he's putting up some serious numbers. And he's playing on a really good football team that does look like they're on a path to potentially another playoff run. So I think it makes sense. I wouldn't advise buying it now. We were talking about that today on the Cover 3 podcast. Like, it's a little rich right now for me to see that. Like, if he struggles in a game or if they do lose a game against one of their better opponents, I think that might be a time to snatch it up. But if you listen to Kirk Cignetti and the focus they've got, maybe they don't lose another game. They are ticked off at Indiana.
It's always tough to take the betting favorite because the value's gone, and to hold on to that, we're going to see a lot of jockeying as we've seen in the positions. There might be another opportunity through no fault of Mendoza or Indiana's own to maybe get a little better value. The 7.5, you're going to take it, you're going to lay it. Is Iowa going to offer enough resistance? Do you still like what IU is going to bring to the table after that blowout win over Illinois?
I think they found something on offense because their offense had been atrocious, and they did play better against Rutgers. Iowa did, but I'm not getting in front of this freight train. Like, I thought about back in Iowa. I thought they were a team that I thought could be a lot better this year with Mark Gronowski at quarterback. And while I think he's improving every single week, again, like I said, Kirk Cignetti already has talked about this team. He doesn't even want to talk about Illinois last week. He said this is going to be a tougher test, and he knows the atmosphere that he's going to be playing at Kinnick. But I think there's too much firepower. I'm curious to see what sort of Iowa fight you see. Phil Parker is one of the better defensive coordinators that's out there, but I just think Indiana is that good, and I think they're on this mission to try to get last season. Everyone questioned them. Everybody looked at them, said, should they have been in the playoffs? When they lost in the playoffs, they said, see, you shouldn't have been there. I think that really has agitated this team and the entire locker room. I think they're out to prove a point anytime they get an opportunity to, including if they're up by 7 and they have an opportunity to score in the fourth quarter, where maybe you might be a little more conservative. I think that could push it over, so I'm going to take Indiana.
Yeah, if you want to look at things that are a little bit alarming in terms of our reality not exactly aligning with our expectations, you might point to Iowa and Rutgers having an absolute shootout last Friday night in terms of everything we thought about Iowa and everything we thought about Rutgers. I mean, this Iowa defense still has Phil Parker, but I don't think the Jimmies and the Joes are quite up to the standard that we have come to expect from our usual profile of the Iowa defense. And Mark Gronowski, now that they've told him, quote, to let it rip, seems to really be settling into himself. I think that this is a situation where the implied score based on the total and the spread is around 28-21. Like, I don't think that's anywhere close to the kind of game we get. I think this is a higher scoring game. I think Indiana could maybe even threaten covering the over themselves. So maybe I'd love what you're going with, Danny, by laying the 7 and a hook. But my best bet here is I'm going to tackle that over, especially at 48.5. So Iowa overs have been a thing that I don't think a lot of people have been paying attention to. And Indiana's offense is just an absolute machine.
We're going to hit a break here on HQ Spotlight. When we come back, we'll continue to talk about the college football slate, and that includes a top 15 matchup in Oxford as Ole Miss hosts LSU Saturday afternoon. Welcome back to the show. Another ranked-unranked matchup. We've got LSU and Ole Miss. Once again, we're going to spend a little bit of time on this one before we get picks from the fellas, because it's a tight game, tight spread, lots of storylines. Danny, I'm going to give you first word on this one. Given everything with LSU and Ole Miss, what interests you most about this game?
The Trinidad Chambliss story. This, to me, is where you could have a Wally Pipp type situation for Austin Simmons, who, again, another player who hadn't played, and yet he comes in with a lot of hype. He had great pedigree, and he was supposed to be this breakout star. He struggles in their first 2 games, has 2 interceptions versus Kentucky. He gets, because he's hurt, he can't play, and all of a sudden, Ole Miss has not looked back, and the offense has looked way better. But the question is, can he do it now against LSU, where the level of competition has risen that much? And then even more interestingly, what happens of all the dynamics that could unfold in this game? Like, let's say he doesn't play good, but they win. Do you still ride the hot hand? Or if he plays great and they lose, Do they go back to Austin Simmons? So a lot of dynamics there for the quarterback at Ole Miss.
Chip, 1 second, hold on here. Can we bring that graphic up once again, side by side with Chambliss and Simmons? Because I think, Danny, as a quarterback here, those numbers look really similar, except for the turnovers. Is that really the reason we're seeing a difference between Chambliss and Simmons?
I think so. He's been a little bit more accurate with the football. He's been a little bit better of a runner, too. And again, maybe some of that's because Austin Simmons had both of his ankles taped versus Kentucky. But priority number one is always take care of the football. And there's somebody that's also, how about the age difference? I mean, I think Trinidad Chambliss, I think is 23, 24 years old. Austin Simmons is still just 19 years old. So we've seen that trend over the last few years with the COVID years of veteran guys who have been around. They're much more mature. They've seen a lot more. They've experienced a lot more. They know how to take care of the football. So I think that is something that's been an impact for Ole Miss as well. Leadership, too.
What about you, Chip?
First of all, great call on the age difference and the maturity difference. He's a Division II national champion. I guarantee you the hotels they were staying at in that playoff run at Division II ain't what you're getting in the college football playoff. That guy has been through some stuff, seen some things, and been a winner at that level. So great call on the age difference, maturity difference. A lot of stuff there with Ole Miss. But I'm going to turn our attention to LSU. You know, we made the argument after week one that LSU going into Death Valley and taking down Clemson gave LSU an argument to be one of the best teams in the country. And there has been very little since that game that has been able to reinforce the idea that LSU has a claim to number one in the country. We've seen the AP voters react with slowly slotting other teams ahead, and they're starting to slide down just a little bit. But, man, what a test for the Tigers as they now have to really be able to go up against an Ole Miss team and showcase that they are a dynamic offense. Because while I do think that LSU defensively is very, very good and has taken huge steps forward in year two under Blake Baker, I just have not seen enough from this offense to be encouraged. And Ole Miss is not an elite defense, but they are a very good defense. This is a road environment, and they do like to get after the passer. Can the LSU offensive line hold up against the pass rush and pave the way for a ground game that has been frankly absent and well below expectation? So if we're going to talk about LSU, similar to the way that we should, given that tiny little number beside their name, then we need to see a better performance here against a quality opponent.
Yeah, this win could help validate what people thought the LSU-Clemson win would be. Of course, we're 4 weeks removed from that now. This is the third straight year that these two teams are meeting as ranked teams. To Chip's point, they held Garrett Nussmeier last year to some of his career worst numbers passing. So, Danny, take me through the handicap here of a 1.5-point spread. You've taken a couple of home dogs,
yeah.
But now you're taking a home short favorite.
So anytime you see those numbers in front of them and you say, oh, there's a 4th-ranked team in the country against a 13th-ranked team, and yet, something tells you something's a little bit fishy here, I think it's time to follow the odds makers. Plus, I think you have to follow what you've seen with your eyes. Ole Miss has been the better football team. And I know the wins aren't exactly the most impressive, but I do think last week's game was impressive against a really good group of 5 team. And going on the road, Kentucky, getting in and out there with a younger quarterback, with a different quarterback, then making the switch and getting it done against Arkansas, who I think is capable of beating Notre Dame. I think this team is just better. I think they're the better football team. Chip mentioned the offensive line issues of LSU, and they have not been able to run the football. You combine that with Garrett Nussmeier, who's been very underwhelming. There's been some injury question marks. It was his knee in training camp. It's been his torso, his midsection there. He does not look like the same quarterback that's sort of been able to play that role of hero for LSU. The one thing that makes me nervous is the one player, for LSU that could potentially make a difference, and that's Perkins on the defensive side of the ball. Harold Perkins could be that difference maker where he could wreak havoc. We've seen him do it before against a mobile quarterback. We saw him get the big pressure on the road at Clemson to harass Cade Klubnik into a poor throw at the end of the game. It's one thing that makes me nervous, but I do like Ole Miss at home.
Tommy, it's not going to come as a surprise to you. We've known each other for a long time, but this ain't exactly a model. You know, the way I'm handicapping things, I'm not spitting out exact numbers. I've got a read of a game. I've got a feel for it. I see the way these teams match up. I like the full game under, but as you can tell by this number right here, 55.5, let's look for some even more opportune ways that we can find winners. I love first half under 28.5, because I do think that this is going to be a game where LSU's defense does a good job of keeping Ole Miss's offense in check. And then on the other side, we see that this LSU offense still can't get a lot going, still can't be able to hit those explosive plays. We talked a little bit on the Cover 3 podcast on Wednesday about how when LSU does have scoring drives, they are long and methodical, and at just about 9 plays per scoring drive, that type of effort without explosion has them ranking around UCLA range and other teams that, if they haven't fired their coach, are at least finding themselves in hot water. And oh yeah, Army, which is a triple option offense. So I just think nothing is easy for this LSU offense. LSU defense is very good. It's strength on strength. It's weakness on weakness. And ultimately that kind of stalemate leads me to think there is going to be less scoring than one would think given the scores between these two teams in recent years.
I may tell you on that one as well. We took the Texas Tech Utah under first half, 29.5, and we saw how ugly that turned out to be, and then it did go over in the second half for live bettors there. So that's a look at the 114th Magnolia Bowl with LSU and Ole Miss. Let's head to College Station, talk Texas A&M, a top 10 team in the country, welcoming Jackson Arnold and Auburn here. Tigers catching 6.5. Last time we saw Texas A&M, the 1-point win over Notre Dame, they're looking good. We certainly know Auburn's been on the road a lot this year, Danny. 6.5, you want to grab the points. Take me through the reason why.
Did you know Auburn got robbed last week at Oklahoma? That was the worst officiated game that I have seen. Now, did it cost them? Does it mean they would have won the game? They had a chance. They had the lead still, despite those 14 points that were, gifted to Oklahoma with the controversial play and then taken off the board for Auburn with the fumble, scoop, and score. So I think this team was very close to upsetting Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is a really good football team. And by the way, did you notice what Auburn's defense did to John Mateer and company? Held him to just 22 points offensively, and one of them was the trick play that should have been called back. I think this defense does travel, and Marcel Reed is going to be problematic. He is really good. They have a really good running back in the backfield, but I also think on the other side, Jackson Arnold did feel like he found a little bit of mojo in that game. Got Cam Coleman going with a touchdown pass. I don't think it's going to be necessarily a shootout potentially. I think Auburn's defense is what keeps them in this game, and I do think Auburn can have some success against Texas A&M's defense, which has been struggling as of late. So I think Auburn is very much in this game. I thought Auburn was going to be a dumpster fire. I think they're playing really hard for Hugh Freeze. I'm curious if they lose this game, how the rest of the season goes. But this feels like one of those must-win backs against the wall. Texas A&M feeling themselves a little bit. I think Auburn gets the cover here.
I think Auburn's defense might have a little bit of trouble matching up. I agree that they are great against the run, but this passing attack for Texas A&M has really taken off, and it's all been because of the transfer portal additions of KC Concepcion and Mario Craver. Craver comes over from Mississippi State. If you haven't watched him, short, explosive, shifty, moves all around the offense. KC's a little bigger, but equally versatile. They give him some end-arounds, reverses, and he can make plays through special teams. Those are the real reasons, in my opinion, plus the offensive line, that we've seen Marcel Reed be able to take some steps forward. But I've got real concerns about this Texas A&M defense, and particularly this Texas A&M pass defense. Cam Coleman, good gravy. I think he is going to feast in this game against this Aggies secondary. And Eric Singleton's done a good job of being able to continue the consistency that he had as one of the real reliable wide receivers from his time at Georgia Tech. I do think this is going to get a little bit of a shootout. Could be tight early, but maybe keep your eye on if we get an even better line if it is, because there is also the potential that this Auburn defense playing its second straight road game would end up maybe letting go of the rope. But I don't hate Danny's call here, because there is some vibesy ball don't lie that could be coming Auburn's way against Texas A&M.
And to Danny's point with the Tigers, given what the rest of the season might look like, get the best effort this time for the rest of the year, potentially. Who knows how it all plays out. By the way, just to cover Chip as well, both Auburn and Texas A&M combined 6-1 to the over this year to help out that overplay. Tennessee and Hail State. We were talking about Mississippi State being a cover team. 7.5 is what Joey Aguilar and company are laying here. They scored a bunch of points against UAB. Speaking of maybe defensive worries, I don't know if the Vols stopped anybody, even if it was UAB late in that game. You guys both like the total in terms of pace of play. Chip, I'm going to give you first word because you're playing a bit of a specific play here. First quarter total?
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee first quarters are back. I don't know if you guys remember when Josh Heupel showed up, the thought was Josh Heupel is here to sell tickets and score touchdowns. And that offense would get out and get rocking early and often. Things haven't always been as consistent over the course of his entire tenure in Knoxville, but I think that we have declared that Tennessee first quarter overs are back. Now they're going up against a Mississippi State team, Blake Shapen at quarterback, very potent as well. So my best bet is actually going to be the first quarter over 13.5. And if this exotic is a little too exotic for you, let's lay it out simple. We got 2 up-tempo offenses. That means we probably have 3 or 4 possessions in the first quarter of the game. You just need, in order to get over 13.5, for between those 4 possessions to get 2 touchdowns. And given the way that both of these teams can start fast with offensive-minded head coaches, I don't think that's too much to ask. So I'm going to go with the first quarter over here, and then I'll decide whether or not to tune in depending on the score the rest of the way. It's a very, very busy Saturday. Let's count on what we can rely on, and that's Tennessee first quarter.
See, Chip's brilliant here because what he said, I think he's right. I think he won't have to sweat this one out. I think I'll have to stick around for the third quarter for mine. And I know it's not a third quarter play. It's a game total. I'll go over for all the reasons that you mentioned. This Tennessee offense, we can trust their fireworks to put up. But also, think about who Josh Heupel's coaching against. It's one of his old proteges, somebody who's running a very similar system in Jeff Lebby. Blake Shapen has been really good. Tennessee's defense hasn't been great. Neither has Mississippi State's. I think this is more of a track meet up and down the field. I think Tennessee wins pretty comfortably here. I wouldn't mind backing the Vols with the number, but I do think this one goes over. I think it's a higher scoring game.
Yeah, you may want to also look at maybe just Tennessee's team total, just back them and see that they get their points, which again, they hit against UAB last week. Arizona and Iowa State, 49.5 is the total, and we have a spread, another one just under a touchdown. This will be one of our first night games that we're talking about out at Ames. Iowa State, one of those week 0 teams, played out there in Ireland, coming back, having a nice season up to date. But the question becomes, can they keep it up against the Wildcats here? You guys are both on the same side. Chip, which side is that on?
That is going to be on Iowa State. I will lay the 6.5, but I hear you people, because what do we say? We take Matt Campbell as a dog, we fade him as a fave. I hear you, I hear you. But I think that at some point you've just got to call a spade, and this Iowa State team is just a good football team, and they are coming out of an off week to be able to reset and recalibrate after that great 4-0 start to the season. Now, Arizona comes in after being one of the pleasant surprises in the Big 12. I think a lot of people, myself included, were wrong to just bail on Brent Brennan and on the idea that this Arizona team was going to be competitive. They have been very good, and that's why we see this thing open at 7.5 and quickly get bought up so that now it is down to 6.5. But while we have seen a much improved team, I cannot get out of my head that even with numbers that were big, Brent Brennan's Arizona Wildcats, were 1-4 against the spread as a road underdog last season. So while Matt Campbell's normally somebody we buy as a dog, I think I will ride with him as a favorite this time in Iowa State to be able to cover the 6.5.
Do you remember what happened before the bye week, Chip? They had their worst performance of the year. They almost tanked and lost and potentially lost the undefeated season that they've got so far, which I think is a good thing. I think they probably were looking forward to the bye, maybe had that on their mind, but they are coming back focused. They're back at home. They're fresh. I trust Rocco Becht playing at home. I love that it's under a touchdown. I wouldn't trust it much more than that, but I'll go ahead and back Iowa State here. I think they get it done. They realize what's at stake now in the Big 12, very much alive as a Big 12 potential, Big 12 championship run for them. May not be the prettiest, but I say they get the win and cover.
Becht and Fafita in this game. Guys, certainly appreciate it. Not done yet. We're going to hit one more break here on the show. Home stretch, though. Top 10 battle in Happy Valley, Oregon and Penn State. It's a whiteout game. Nittany Lions laying just over a field goal. Home stretch here on HQ Spotlight. Penn State Nittany Lion fans, look away. Program 0-5 straight up and against the number. The past 5 games against AP top 6 teams. Lost each game by single digits, 1 possession games, and they failed to cover, as you can see that we've highlighted all of them there. That being said, 3.5-point favorites against Oregon, which were the regular season champs of the Big Ten last year, and a total at 52.5. Again, this will be a night game. It'll be a whiteout, Chip Patterson. Storyline time. What piques your interest?
Can Penn State flip the switch? We had a very different view of these two teams when we were at Big Ten Media Days and got the chance to speak with James Franklin and Dan Lanning, and even talking to those coaches. I don't want to speak for Danny, but one of my impressions was that James knew exactly what he had with this Penn State team, and that all they had to do was go and handle the expectations, show up and do your work, and they'd be in a great position to achieve all their goals. Dan Lanning was a little bit more of a, yeah, guys, I don't know. I'm interested to see what I get in fall camp too. And yet, what have we seen on the field? Either somebody's got a great poker face, or this Oregon team really did grow up during fall camp, because they have hit the ground running. And just in terms of, like, forget the opponents, just in terms of the way that you handle business, Oregon's been one of the most impressive teams in the entire country this year. You simply cannot say that for Penn State, but Penn State has an off week. If they can flip the switch, this would be the best opportunity in terms of the opponent, the team that beat you in the Big Ten title game, in terms of the environment, whiteout scenario right there in Happy Valley. If Penn State can flip the switch, we come out of this game and we're like, there we go. That's the Penn State team that we were looking for. But if they can't, then it's a huge opportunity for Oregon to be able to enter its name into the debate for the best team in the country.
Totally agree. I almost wonder if it's a flip the switch or it's what have you been holding back? Because when I watch them play, some of the stuff formationally that they were doing last year with Tyler Warren, Andy Koltnicki is a great schemer. They haven't been very creative on offense yet. On defense, what have we heard about Jim Knowles? One of the reasons they hired him was to be this guy who brings these crazy blitzes, put a lot on his defense to come from different areas. We haven't seen that either. So have they just been holding back for 3 weeks, realizing all we got to do is win? We don't need style points. We're already one of the top teams in the country. That's what I can't wait to see from Penn State. Have they just been holding things back and bottled up and ready to unleash on the Oregon Ducks? Or have they just not been that good? Because they have been one of the least impressive top 5 teams in the country so far, where they really haven't had one game where you're like, wow, it's just been okay. Can they break out, like Chip said?
That's an interesting take, because if you actually look at both schedules, it's not too far off. Now, Penn State's not really played anybody, we know that, but they haven't covered. That's the key. Right. They've been 0-3. Now, Oregon hasn't played anybody much better, but they won by margin. They've shown us that they've been able to do that, especially lately. That being said, 3.5, Danny, that the hook may matter to you. You're on the Ducks here, coming in and getting at least the cover.
I am. I'm going to go with what we've seen so far. And I do think, like, I don't know if it's easy to just flip that switch. And that's where I'm curious to see what we get out of Penn State. But if you ask me, like, who I trust right now, I think there's something to momentum and confidence. And I think even Penn State fans are getting a little bit restless, like, what is going on? And there is not a player probably in the entire country that has more pressure on him than Drew Aller, because to this point in his career, on these biggest stages against the best competition, he has not played great. And that's something where I need to see it before I believe it. Now, could they push him around with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen and sort of impose their will against an Oregon defense, which probably is not as physical as some of the Big Ten defenses they'll go against? Maybe. But I'm going to go ahead and scoop up those points, because I think if Penn State does win, I think it's probably a lower scoring game where it does come down to a field goal. But I do not trust Penn State to go out there and say, yep, I'm going to trust them to just lay the points. We just saw this matchup in the Big Ten championship game. I know there's different quarterbacks. Dante Moore has been spectacular. The one reason I don't like Oregon to just win the game outright is because this is his big first matchup in a big road environment that will be one of the best atmospheres we've seen on the season. But at 3.5, I'll go ahead and take those points with the Ducks.
I'm going to be tackling the under here. I think this is a very different football game than what we saw in the climate-controlled Lucas Oil Fieldhouse 45-37 in the Big Ten championship game. This is not that. This is Happy Valley. And this is a Penn State team that when they get into these massive games against the juggernauts, how many times have we seen these be lower scoring games? The Ohio State game last year comes to mind, among many others. And so I think that Penn State wants to rely on its defense. I think Penn State wants to rely on its environment. And I do realize that the potential for a defensive touchdown or something is the fire that I am playing with here. But the piece on this that I'm going to add is that when Oregon went on the road recently, so at Northwestern, a little bit of a lower scoring game. When you go last year to Wisconsin, 16-13, lower scoring game. At Michigan, hot start, but didn't necessarily sustain it for all 4 quarters. And then at Purdue, 35-0. I just think that this is an Oregon team that in these road environments, they can still be elite, but they aren't necessarily operating in that whole blow you out of the water mentality. I don't have any certainty about who will be the winner of this game until we start to see somebody bleed, until we start to see who punches first and if there is a counterpunch. But what I do feel good about is that this is not going to be the track meet that we saw in the Big Ten title game last year, so I'll go under the total.
Just to put a cap on this, 4th top 10 matchup this year. The other 3 was week 1. 3 games decided by 7 points or fewer, and the lower-ranked team won each of those games, just to give you a little note on that one. Let's move on, folks, from this game in Happy Valley and talk about Alabama and Georgia. Most consecutive home games favored. I mean, that nearly 100 from Bama that was ended in 2024. You see Georgia trying to at least catch Boise State in that department. Short spread, 2.5 with a total of 52.5. You guys are actually both on the over in this one. So we've been talking a lot of totals today, Chip. Curious, because have you looked at the spread first, had a strong opinion before you pivoted to the total, or did you just love the total ASAP?
I love the total ASAP. I think that what we have seen in the very, very high-level SEC games in recent years is that very, very good offense has been beating very, very good defense. And that while we've gotten some lower-scoring games where the defenses are able to stand up, they have often been with teams or scenarios where the offense just hasn't been able to bring it. And so obviously last year is a big part of this. Really, the whole Alabama-Georgia history, last 5 or 6 meetings, a lot of them have gotten to this number of getting up into the mid-50s. There's too much skill position talent that we've got from both of these squads now that Georgia has gotten Colby Young back into the rotation, picked up Zachariah Branch as well. And then you even go back to that Tennessee game with Georgia, Gunnar Stockton showing that he is able to step up and make the big-time throws when he is called to do it. And I just think that this will be another game like that where Kalen DeBoer that has that Alabama team geared up and ready to go. He's had a lot of success against some of the aggressive coverages that Georgia likes to play. Then at the same time, I'm not sure if this Alabama defense is going to be ready for a Georgia offense that showcased against Tennessee that it does have another gear that it was not showing early in the season. So whether it is earlier this year with Georgia, Tennessee, last year with Alabama, Georgia, or a number of other, very good on very good top tier SEC on top tier SEC teams, I just see this one getting a little bit of loose with a lot of explosive plays, and that's why I'm ultimately going to be targeting that over on the total.
Tommy, I thought about taking Alabama. I kind of like Alabama in this spot, but if it was over 3, I would probably snatch up the points, but it's 2.5. It's that weird number. So I was like Chip. I went and looked at these games. You know what these games doesn't really feature? I mean, we saw Jordan Davis, former Georgia Bulldog, Jalen Carter, Will Anderson Jr., just great defensive linemen and pass rushers, guys that wreak havoc. And they really haven't been at Bama and Georgia here this season yet. Now, maybe they develop. Tim Keenan is back for Alabama, who can make an impact on the interior of that line. But I think that's allowed quarterbacks to have more time, and it's allowed some of these offenses to get going in this game. Alabama's lack of run game does concern me a little bit, but Ty Simpson has been on fire since that Florida State loss. He's completing 89% of his passes, got 6 touchdowns. I know it's lesser competition, but I trust him in this environment to at least operate pretty soundly. And Ryan Williams, by the way, who disappeared in that game against Florida State, all of a sudden he's got his mojo going. And Chip mentioned the breakout game that Gunnar Stockton has with all the offensive explosion that they had against Tennessee. So I look at this game. I think it's higher scoring as well. I lean towards Alabama, but the tricky number there makes me stay away from it. But I think it's a higher scoring game.
We talk about Caleb. Go ahead, Chip.
Yeah, I was just going to say, ultimately, in terms of the side, I think both these head coaches are excellent. I don't trust either one. Kirby Smart's 1-6 against Alabama. Kirby Smart's one of the best coaches around right now. He is 1-6 against Alabama. Now, the one is in the national championship game, so it probably might count for 1.5 or 2. But otherwise, I'd actually be on Georgia. At the same time, Kalen DeBoer, with the losses that he has had as a double-digit favorite, I can't trust Kalen DeBoer. I respect these coaches so much and yet trust them so little on this stage, Tommy. I don't know how to wrestle with that, which is why I'm going more with the style of game, which has me going on the total.
Yeah, it's more of a lean for me. You guys mentioned when to fade the board, but actually in this spot, catching points, he's usually pretty good, but I can't still, in a tight game against a good team, trust that. A quick follow, you mentioned Ryan Williams, which our colleague Damian Harris went in on him, had a good game, but he also had a drop in the end zone that hit his helmet, and then more so was the reaction on the sideline that it seemed like he was happy with that. So do you think any of that gets addressed as a team as they get ready for a big game?
If Nick Saban was there, he would not have liked that reaction. I think this is a different atmosphere. Doesn't mean that you still can't win, and I wonder what the film session was like, but I don't think the reaction was probably as harsh a reaction as Ryan Williams would have received if Nick Saban and company was on that sideline.
Okay, we can be quick on the last couple here to wrap up our pick show. UMass catching 44.5 against Mizzou. Dan, you're going to lay the big number here with the Tigers?
No offense to the Fighting Jenny Dells, but I think this one's going to get lopsided. You know, last week we had Florida State against Kent State, laid a big number, got that big win. Missouri, by the way, is a really good football team. Bo Pribula has taken over that job. Their offense is operating on all cylinders. They have one of the best running backs in the game right now, where I think they can lean on UMass, pretty much call their number in this game. So I'm going to say they lay them. I'm going to lay them here. I know it's a big number, but I think they get it done pretty close. Even with backups, I think UMass can be completely overwhelmed.
Speak for yourself. We can be quick here. Pull up a chair, boys, because I got thoughts. Right? So here's what I'm thinking. 13.5 is a huge number to cover in the first quarter. Okay. Now, I understand that Missouri was up 14-0 in the first quarter last year when these two teams played, but a lot of that was because of a 63-yard touchdown on a reverse from Luther Burden that allowed them to score like that. I mean, do you really think that Missouri going into this game with all the other big games that they've had, an off week on the other side of this, where is the urgency going to be to come out and step on the gas right away? I mean, 13.5 is a massive number to cover. You're basically saying they're going to get the ball 2 times. They're going to score touchdowns on both of them. If they just happen to have a couple procedural penalties, then all of a sudden you could work yourself out of being able to score. So I'm going UMass first quarter plus 13.5.
I love that. Chip loves to get in his bag on some of these exotics.
Jenny Dell would love that play.
Yeah, she certainly would be in it for a quarter and then maybe go out and do some other things. Speaking of exotics, Chip's got one for our last game. It's going to be BYU at Colorado out in Boulder. The line here, 6.5 with a total at 47 and a hook. Chip, you got one of those pre-flop, predetermined third quarter plays on the show. We got to sneak it in.
Yeah, BYU, for those who weren't paying attention, went all the way to Greenville, handled their business, I think, in somewhat impressive manner against an ECU team that has been pretty tough. They've got to fly all the way to Boulder now to go and play against Colorado. And so is there a chance that things are a little bit slow to get going, to get into rhythm out the gate? Sure. But I think BYU is the better team here. I think BYU is the more complete team here. But the way that I found a good angle to attack that and build on that handicap has to do with what's going to happen after they go into the locker room, catch their breath, and reset. Because if there's a team that I don't trust in the second half right now, it is Colorado. If there's a team I don't trust to necessarily close out a game, it's Colorado. But instead of targeting the fourth quarter where I don't have as much of an edge, I'm going to target the third quarter because so far against FBS competition, BYU is averaging 8.5 points per game in the third quarter while only giving up 1.5 points per game in the third quarter. That plus 7 points per game margin in the third quarter is one of the best in the country against FBS opponents. And so I think that this BYU team that has yet to give up a touchdown in the third quarter this season will do so again with a strong response. Again, could be a sleepy start. Would not be surprised to see Colorado up early, playing at home, prime time event for Coach Prime. But coming out of the locker room, I do think Kalani Sitake and BYU will be a little bit more on it for that third quarter and take advantage of that advantage that they've been building all season long.
So I don't have a great feel for this game. I feel like I'm trying to figure out what Colorado is. I think they found their quarterback in Caden Salter as he played good last week. There'd been a little bit of a musical chairs position there. But the one thing I trust in this sport is physicality. And BYU has an identity. Kalani Sitake has built that identity about being one of the more physical teams in the Big 12, if not the country. We saw this game unfold last season in the bowl game where BYU beat up Colorado. I think it could be similar in this one. I think they get the running game going, and that defense will be too much. Colorado's been running the ball very effectively. I think BYU wins here and covers on the road.
Sound like more of a lean for you, though.
Yeah.
Than BYU. Okay, just to be clear. Great stuff, guys. Danny Kanell and Chip Patterson, part of the Cover 3. You can catch them, of course, on their podcast. And I just found out that Chip's going to be in studio. College football pregame this weekend. It should be fun. Catch them on their streams and YouTubes and podcast, and then check out college football pregame Saturday morning.